Hello there, and a very warm welcome to Chazingdra Chats, the show where we take a stroll through the life stories of people in the Pokémon community, discovering the 6 Pokémon on their dream team along the way. I'm Charlie Merriman, Merri by name, Merri by nature, otherwise known as Chazingdra, a host and commentator for the Pokémon Video Game Championship Series, and a content creator, and this week as every week, I very much hope my guest and I can make your day merry, because I have the pleasure of being joined by my good friend, Scott GLAZA, and fellow Pokémon commentator as well. Scott, how are you doing?
Doing great. Yeah, I wish I had the exciting intro where like so many people have riffed off of what you did. I was like, oh man, I gotta think of something. But as a guy who once used a username of Scott on the Nugget Bridge forums, I just don't have it.
I think that is an intro in itself. Just Scott. That's what it says on the tin. Great. As I say, you and I both competitive video game commentators, but you've been around doing this for quite a bit longer than I have. I'll leave you, though, to give a fuller introduction to yourself.
Yeah, I think I'm verging on the most geriatric of VGC casters, where, 2013 was year one, where, I live in Seattle now, but yeah, that was the first time I'd even been to the West Coast for the Vancouver Regional Championships that year. I think I've gotten to, or Regional World Championships. I think I've gotten to be a part of 9 worlds on the talent side, so it's been a lot of fun. Got to see us grow from a very tiny stream and barely having a professional-looking booth to watching the LED floor at the stadium last year. So it's been really cool to be a part of the ride.
We were on the roster casting Worlds this year in Anaheim, which was an honor and a joy. And even though we weren't on the desk together, we were certainly in some more casual lounge side segments. But I look forward to the day when we do get to be on the desk together.
Yeah, I hope so too. I'm a big fan of your work. Whereas it's fun to at least get to be out there at least a little bit with you during the watch party for Sunday. But yeah, I was kind of hoping we'd get a game.
Yeah, alas. Well, plenty of time. I want to take a deeper dive into the many, many facets and aspects of competitive Pokemon from your experience over the years, both casting and competing. I know there's so much to unpack, so shall we do this?
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it.
Great, let's dive in. We're all looking forward to it as well. Let's discover your life story and the 6 Pokemon on your dream team. What we're going to start off with here, very appropriately, is your childhood.
Yeah, I really love these childhood segments. It's kind of my favorite part of this podcast, where you kind of get an idea of everyone as an adult kind of from watching them. But the childhood thing, right? Who are these strange people when they were children? And what better place to start with competitive Pokemon than being a 10-year-old or whatever, right? It's where the dream is supposed to begin. For me, I'm an only child, and I think all of us wind up with our own weird traumas from not being socialized enough as children. But for me, it really ties into Pokemon, where I think in 1996, so the year Pokemon came out in Japan, but 2 years before it made it to the States. From then into 97 and 98, I changed schools every year, where once was just my parents kind of trying to get a better education for me, and then once because we actually moved because my father got a new job, and I don't know that I was ever the greatest friend maker. I just don't have that kind of charisma where even as a child, I think I was kind of an acquired taste. So I kind of been struggling with, making friends and kind of just forming bonds, that sort of nonsense. And Pokemon really helped me where, in 98, I kind of jumped on Pokemon right when it came to the States. And, at first it was just, a really nice, individual experience where I think I didn't realize at the time, but it was, my first JRPG, which is certainly, even as an adult now, I spend a ton of my time playing it, but really the collection, the socialization aspects where I got it just before the craze, and it's wild to me as I guess an older Pokemon fan now, just to realize how many people didn't get to live through kind of the hype of that phenomenon in late 1998, early 1999, where Pokemon was just everywhere. It was kind of like Go launch week, but for 5 or 6 months at least. And for me, it was really formative where, I just got to, I met a lot of people through it, and, just trading Pokemon at recess or whatever. But also just kind of the communal learning, I think, was really fun, where it's everything is magical. They felt more like real animals back then because, nobody knew anything about it. Right. So, I met the cool kids at my school through that, where, even back then I was a little bit too excited about Pokemon. So I was a little further along. I remember, helping people finish their Pokedexes. The only time I finished it was in blue version. I got the full 151 and then didn't do it again for much later. And yeah, it's just really cool. I remember, we had that phase where, we were trading Pokemon cards at recess. So then Pokemon cards became banned from school because it was too distracting to everyone. And I did my first Pokemon League at I think the now defunct Toys R Us. Used to be a very big toy store chain here, but times are tough in the era of e-commerce. But it's just fun to think back to all that stuff. I guess I've gotten to witness like the modern version of it so much, but things were a lot sloppier and messier at first. And as a child, it's exactly what you want, right? Or everything was new and strange.
Yeah, we had Toys R Us here as well. R.I.P. And I mean, you say that Pokemon Go launch week, but for at least 6 months. I mean, yeah, I remember that being at least a year. That initial Pokemania, it was astonishing. I just remember going around, I don't know, family gatherings or friends' houses or whatever, and just everyone was playing Pokemon and trading Pokemon. And to have completed the Pokedex in your original Pokemon Blue cartridge, that's something that plenty of people will have just dreamt of, now as adults as well as back then. How was that? Do you remember that feeling when you were younger?
Yeah, I thought it was a lot of fun. Or it was one of those things where I kind of envy the childlike curiosity. Where I think I got to 140 or something just by accident before I was really trying. And I remember really getting the last 5, or I got to trade for the other fossil, and then just some weird goofy stuff I was missing. And yeah, I still remember I can see myself sitting in my parents' living room finishing the Pokedex and being all proud of myself. And I think that the thing that really helped me, funnily enough, was obviously it was also kind of the dawn of the internet, and it was before I kind of learned not to trust everything I was reading online. And I went to summer camp that summer when I think that Pokemon's kind of as craziest as at least when we discovered the animated series. I think we were a few months behind. I lived in a smaller town, so we were 2 Dewford Town trendy phrases behind. But it was really cool. So I remember we were all hearing all these rumors, oh, you just got to beat the Elite Four 100 times, then you can go behind Bill's house and find the secret Eevee evolution. And I didn't find that. I'm sure it was back there somewhere. I moved a lot of trucks, didn't see any Mew, but kind of just throughout the course of doing all these ridiculous things that people on the internet were trying to get me to do, trying to find that weird Blastoise Venusaur fusion from the animated series, I couldn't find that either. But yeah, I got so far along, and it's funny to think back now, right? Where it's just so obvious that all of that was nonsense, but I kind of like not having that filter then, right? It was such a cool thing to me about Pokemon that it all seemed like it could be real, and maybe in another game I would have known better, but shoot, I got these lizards turning into dragons, why can't there be a Mew hidden behind a truck?
You're so right, actually. I think it's something that I guess is lost to time now, just generally, because the internet is so ubiquitous. Just be it Pokemon or any game, it doesn't quite let the imagination run as wild as it did, and just full of mystery. It's like Generation 2 onwards when shiny Pokemon were introduced, just so rare that you find one that isn't that rare Gyarados in Gold and Silver or Crystal, and it's did that just happen? Is this meant to happen? Oh, fascinating stuff. So you said that you would sort of immediately jumped on the Pokemon bandwagon as soon as it came to the USA. Why was that? What spoke to you about it? Had you heard about it before, etc.?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a pretty petty backstory, but my next door neighbor growing up, his parents were a little bit wealthier than mine. So he was right on the boat, very from the beginning, where I think it was literally launch week, and I saw the game on a shelf, and I saw the box, oh, this looks really interesting, and he wouldn't let me play it. So I was I begged my parents to get it for me so I could try it out, and I did not quite realize the phenomenon I was walking into, but just kind of by virtue this would be a good way to make friends. I bet if we both play this game together, little I realized we'd be best friends for years, in part because of that decision. But for me, it was just magical, right? Where I was never allowed to have pets, so this is kind of still the closest I ever got. I've always been a big fan of both Pokemon and kind of the other monster raising games. Both of my parents grew up on farms, so they were always around animals growing up. But because of that, there's a lot of chores, and they just didn't want that in their adult life. They also didn't trust me to take care of any animals. We're going to get a dog, and Scott's going to be great for 2 days, and then we're going to be taking care of the dog, which I still complain about when I see them. They're probably right. Or I don't know that I've ever shown a great sense of responsibility. But this for me is the closest I got, right? I started with Bulbasaur, so I had my little like plant frog. I think at the time I viewed him more of a plant dinosaur, but after watching it move and like Let's Go Pikachu Eevee, plant frog. But yeah, I thought it was just neat. And then even though maybe the way I got in wasn't quite as honorable as it could have been or whatever, it just for me was great. Where I became really good friends with that kid. I only really stayed in touch with one friend from like that middle school of the three that I was in 3 years, but that guy's still one of my best friends, and like our friendship was really like expanded through Pokemon, where we always have like our sleepovers, even though we lived in different towns, and we just stay up all night playing Pokemon. We always used to like restart Red and Blue version, where I must have played through that game hundreds of times. Where like the Blue version I left complete, and Red would just keep resetting, and we'd like kind of race and kind of like have our different versions. I think if the internet had been in a different place, we probably would have gone into speed running, since that was kind of what we were doing at the time, I guess. But it was just a lot of fun, and I think Kanto is always going to have a really important spot in my heart for that reason. Though, I just can't go back through the games anymore. It's just too many times as a kid.
Interesting. Maybe in years to come, you will finally decide it's time and relive all of that nostalgia. My final question on this point is, so you were moving around quite a lot, as you said, you were moving schools. Do you have memories of that being tough as a child, and maybe Pokemon easing that?
Yes, yeah. I mean, my parents are always really worried about it. I think even as a kid, I kind of got that they were a little too concerned about whether I was making friends well or not. And like, I mean, again, I've always been a little eccentric, so it works better with some people than for others. And like, the first school, I guess it was normal, where I kind of grew up with everyone. It was weird being the new kid 2 years in a row, where I think that's always tough. The middle year, I think maybe it didn't go as well, where like I'm still really close with the one guy, and he's stayed in the town I grew up in. He's done really well for himself. Like he's running a CPA firm now. So he's had a great life, and it's kind of been fun to watch him develop, and you kind of keep up with what's happening in my hometown through him. But the second school is kind of like in the middle, right? Where I wound up basically with that same group of people for like the 10 to 15 years before I moved across the country, kind of for my adult job. And it was a slow start, where I think people that were friendly, and I was fortunate, even though I guess it didn't help as much in the first year, where we were kind of like one of those gifted programs for the more academically inclined children. So at least it was like a constant group all the time, where we didn't have any intermingling with the other classes at the school. But it was tough, right? I've never been good at making friends. I think it's really stuck with me, kind of, where with this competitive Pokemon stuff even later, I've always really been one of those people trying to keep the group in touch, trying to keep the community together, where I think I'm always afraid of losing those attachments a little bit now, to armchair psychoanalyze myself a little bit. I think Pokemon helped a lot, right? With the trading, and like, there's some people who, I head over for playtime or whatever that I think I wouldn't have otherwise without Pokemon, but like, they wanted to trade or they wanted to battle a little bit. It was such an easy way to get to know people, where it's just like this shared hobby that everyone had. And, I can't imagine, it must be so much tougher for kids nowadays who don't have something like that, where it was just this bond that kind of had my whole generation together, which I think was really cool in retrospect.
Yeah, that was wonderful. I'm very pleased it was there to help things along and make that time a little bit smoother for you. And now it's time to introduce what's going to be the first Pokemon on your dream team. So as a reminder, the aim here is not for Scott to build the most competitively viable team in any way, though he can do that if he so chooses. It's just to choose the Pokemon that have been the most special to Scott over the years, and he can define that for himself in whichever way he wants. I have no idea what they are. He's decided on these in advance. So Scott, tell us what's going to be the first Pokemon on your dream team.
I think for a lot of people, their first partner Pokemon is really special to them, and that's why I'm going to select a different member of the Kanto first partner trio. Like I said, I started with Bulbasaur. I'm going Blastoise. I think child me and adult me are just different people, right? And I understand why Bulbasaur spoke to me when I was just a wee boy, but I've really turned on it. I've become a Blastoise guy. I think I just like the vibe, but it does remind me of this era where I think there was. Eventually, we discovered some interesting ways to get lots of rare candies, but at first, getting a level 100 Pokemon is really difficult. And, my Venusaur made it to level 100. I had two rivals, one of which who had Dugong at level 100, and one of which had Blastoise. And fighting against that Blastoise so many times when we had sleepovers at his place was really fond memory of my childhood. So I think it's kind of stuck with me for that, where it was fun on the opposite side of the field. I really like playing as Blastoise in Pokemon Unite. I used the Mega Evolved Blastoise a little bit in VGC 2014. I think it was highly underrated, and if we get Mega Pokemon back in VGC at some point, I think people shouldn't sleep on Blastoise. So, he's just a cool guy. I know his weirdest goatee thing once he Mega Evolves maybe not the greatest, but we all have some phases there where we work through optimizing our facial hair.
I love that that's the thing you immediately pick up on about Mega Blastoise, and you're so right. Even before you mentioned the goatee, I was trying to picture it and thought there's something weird going on with his chin, isn't there? Yeah, you're so right, Blastoise, and of course the mascot of Pokemon Blue that was the first version that you played. So that makes sense. What do you think it is that speaks to you about Blastoise now that didn't before?
Yeah, I think Squirtle's been incredible marketing, or the animated series really rose Squirtle up above the others. Where I think some of it for me is I just tend to be really taken by Pokemon that are just magical animals, where like the in a weird way, the more creative the Pokemon design is, kind of usually the less attached to it I become. Where maybe again in part because I couldn't have real pets, I didn't want it to go too far away, right? Or it's all right, I like that this is still recognizable to something from the real world, but also something that couldn't exist in this world. I think they're all fun. Blastouse's goofy cannons are ridiculous, right? And why does this living creature have a metal cannon attached to it? And I kind of like the physicality to him in games where we get something that looks a little bit more like what real life combat might look like, or he's a little bulky and kind of push people around a little bit. Where just the concept of Venusaur, I just have a hard time imagining it in real life because it's further away from maybe a real animal. Where I don't know, just such a goofy guy, or imagining it bouncing around. Where Blastoise all right, being a giant bipedal turtle with cannons, a little hard to believe, but I can imagine it. I might have to expand the doorways a little bit if I had one, but that'd be a problem for alternate world me.
Blastoise, yeah. It raises all sorts of fascinating questions, as you say, but we'll leave those questions there for now. Blastoise, welcome to Scott's Stream Team, and everybody, for enjoying this chat with Scott, please do like and subscribe. It would mean a huge amount and directly supports me, mean I can continue to create these episodes and much more content besides. But we've got so much more conversation to have, so we'll move on from there now into the journey across America in 2006.
Yeah, so I didn't really do a whole lot of journeying across America. I actually just went out to Detroit. So it was a couple hours drive, which, depending where you live, could sound like a long or a short distance. Us Midwesterners are sort of famous for having troubled concepts of distance, where 9-hour drive is a one day to us. To other people, that's a bit crazy, and those people are probably correct. But the journey across America for me was really cool, where I started playing Pokemon competitively online towards the end of 2002, but there weren't really any live events at that point, right? There was kind of the original batch of Pokemon leagues, which were mostly trading card game and kind of became entirely trading card game. And then there just wasn't really much that was available to me from then until this mall tour that they did in 2006 to promote, I believe it was Pokemon Emerald. But we played on the GameCube games, I think. Man, it's all blurry now. I should have refreshed my memory a little bit. But it was super fun. It was my first taste of kind of in-person competition. I always kind of wondered what that was like. Actually, I mentioned I had one friend that I stayed close with from that middle school and second grade, and he competed in this event as well. He eventually wound up playing in some VGC tournaments for me once we got to that point too. So he drove us all down. There was 6 of us. The 2 of us were the only ones competing. So for everyone else, it's kind of just a fun mall trip, where the mall that our event was taking place in, a little bit different, I guess, from the convention centers that we get nowadays, but it was just kind of like a central hub area and a giant mall. I believe it's the biggest mall in the state of Michigan, where I grew up. And just a single elimination tournament. It was doubles. Specifically, it was doubles on Generation 3, Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, which had some interesting mechanics. The really interesting one is when a Pokemon gets knocked out, instead of just being a dead slot until the end of a turn, you immediately had to replace them. So there's some wonky strategies where technically you could win the game on the first turn if some people do it with Gengar and Mewtwo, for instance, where you could self-destruct with Mewtwo, potentially knock out both opponents, and then explode with Gengar, and potentially knock out the 2 Pokemon who didn't even start the game on the field. The actual tournament part of this could have gone better for me, where I was underprepared. I think like a lot of us, I'd been pretty successful. Like weirdly, this is kind of already after my peak as a singles player, where I was very short in the very beginning of Generation 3. So I think I was kind of just going like, oh, things are going to be easy. And shockingly, they weren't. I did get to play against Chalky, Gabby's our fellow caster's husband, and I believe round 2. So that was kind of funny. I got a little lucky in that one, and then I was swiftly defeated myself. But it was just cool getting my feet wet, kind of getting to that experience, getting to come down with some friends who did not understand why we were so into this tournament, where I was a little antisocial in the car on the way down. I remember I was kind of just like trying to focus on my last minute prep and getting made fun of for disconnecting myself from everyone in the car. And I thought that was a good, I mean, it's fair, right? I mean, I certainly was, but everyone was kind of just going down for a different reason. And I guess I should shout Chalky out too, by the way. I may have defeated him in that event, but he played again the next weekend in our neighboring state of Ohio. He was able to win the tournament there, and he qualified for the finals himself. So a little better for a season than I had.
Amazing to hear about these very early days of competitive Pokemon video game. Yeah, I mean, as I said to you before we started recording, you talking about, is it a 9-hour drive? Is that an all-day thing or not? Being from the UK, a 9-hour drive, you'd end up in the middle of the ocean. So, I mean, the vastness of the USA compared to the UK never ceases to blow my mind. And I guess my question here is, you clearly always love the competitive side. When you were playing through Generation 1, and I assume that Generation 2 and 3 followed after that for you, and you played through them all, how much of your enjoyment came from specifically the battles, or were you also enjoying just the games as themselves?
I think both. And I think on the game side, I've kind of done a curve where, certainly at the very beginning, right, the battling isn't what drew me in. It was the world, it was the characters. I think Generation 2, I kind of remember the same thing, right, with Gold and Silver. I just love the world so much. I remember I really upset a friend's parent, where this is me just not understanding the world very well. But I got given, I think, Gold version, which I already had for a birthday once, and I kind of regifted it to the kid because he didn't have it, and to me, the experience is like getting to go through the adventure with someone else, right? And I understand why the parent didn't want me to do that. I think she intended to get him and his brother the game for Christmas, and I screwed it up on her a little bit. Sorry, Miss Schultz. I didn't understand. I was just a child. But it was, for me, it was really cool, right? Because of it, he stayed over that night for a sleepover, and we got to the beginning of the game together. And I guess, again, as an only child, to me, that was just magical, right? And I think sharing the experience with people is really what I've always found exciting about Pokemon. And I think it's just easier, it's usually been easier for me to do it through battling, right? Where I think I would have been just as happy probably on a forum discussing how much I like the characters I was in the battling. But obviously battlers get pretty intense, right? There's a lot of optimization there. People get really engaged. And I think it was, to me, it was always really magical just kind of falling down that well, right? Like, how deep can I go? I think I always liked learning about the game more than I liked actually winning or battling or doing any specific thing. It was just kind of expanding my knowledge. And I always remember kind of in the battling side, I guess, again, going back to Generation 2, I remember when I first learned about the concept of breeding Pokemon that had good stats, and I didn't quite get the how little that matters compared to being the right level and doing nonsense like that. But I had a PvP battle where I think my swim team had just gotten break, so we were doing a snack or whatever afterward before our parents picked us up. And I had my level 36 Rhyhorn, who had, I'd given him all the vitamins, so his stats were as high as it could be as a level 36 Pokemon. But fortunately, my opponent wasn't so big on switching, so his level 80 starter Pokemon Pikachu is still out. I guess could have been the starter, because I don't think you can trade that one from Yellow. Or I guess you can. So I think it was his Yellow version starter Pikachu, but on Gold. Regardless, he did not switch it out against my Rhyhorn, so he was slamming me for 10 or whatever as I fired back my powerful level 36 Earthquake. And it's a little silly thinking back, oh, goofy, these poor kids, we were lost. But I think those experiences are always great, right? At the end of the day, I remember a lot of battles I lost too, and as an adult, who cares, right? If we're winning or losing. But I thought just over the years, it was so much fun. And even at Journey Across America, right? We're like, I was bad, right? I think objectively, it's the worst I ever performed at a tournament where I went 2-1. So I guess I had a winning record technically. But like none of us knew what we were doing. Like the way I lost, I don't remember it super well anymore, but like I barely understood what my opponent's Pokemon strategy should be. It was just like terrible preparation. And I think that to me was kind of what was magical about Journey Across America, was that, all right, well, you know what, like this was bad by me, and I learned some lessons where if I get to play in a real life tournament again, I need to come in a little less overconfident. But it was just fun to be there, and like so many people were just so excited to like, wow, a Pokemon thing in real life, where it was just so different from 98 at that point, right? We were like right about the bottom of the hill, where I think at the time, I remember we used to talk, we thought Pokemon was dying, and we were for sure, there's no way, maybe we'll get a 4th generation of games, but there's no way we get anything after that. And feeling like that at the time, I'm so glad I got to do one more real life event before this is all over.
Wow, yeah. We just didn't know the phenomenon that, it was a phenomenon then, but that the phenomenon was to continue to blossom. And next year, that'll be 20 years since that Journey Across America. Absolutely yeah. So to remind you of that, we'll move swiftly on into introducing what's going to be the second Pokemon on your dream team joining Blastoise.
Alrighty. So I guess maybe hearkening to Journey Across America. One Pokemon I've always had a huge attachment to, and I've been told that this is the most overly basic of my favorite Pokemon, is Mewtwo. I don't know that I needed the cheesy talk from his movie, although, I mean, maybe I did, I guess, as an adopted child, maybe the whole circumstances of your birth not mattering thing spoke to me. I'm not sure. And certainly, Mewtwo may be a little bit edgy, but I'll always have a special place in my heart for kind of like that first super powerful Pokemon. I really remember, capturing it for the first time in Red and Blue, and I think it's hard to recreate that moment, right? I think probably for a lot of people, like that first big legendary Pokemon always just have a special place in their heart because it was so different than anything else before, right? I think I'd already wasted my Master Ball, so I didn't have that available for me, and I don't think I understood the concept of save scumming yet. So my heart was beating pretty fast as I tried to capture this Mewtwo, especially because I was not very good at the game at first. I think at one point I lost my blue version before I finished the dex. So I went back after I'd kind of learned a little bit more, and like my team is like Muck, Weezing, Venusaur. It's like, oh, this is a terrible team for catching Mewtwo. Like, how did I possibly? I must have gotten very lucky, but I think it's just all a lot of fun. Again, Mewtwo's another character too. I just love when it appears in other games. Obviously, it has not been so strong in our video game championships over the years. I think it was Gary Chan who did pretty well with it. The one time I was really rooting for it, like, oh, come on, let's get Mewtwo on stream just once. It's really fun in Pokken, really fun in Pokemon Unite. I just kind of love the vibe of it. We don't get a lot of characters that kind of tend to be bad guys in Pokemon, and Mewtwo obviously just misunderstood, not a bad person exactly, but I love that archetype, I guess. And not everything can be cute and cuddly like Pikachu.
You've gone from one of the first Pokemon in any Pokedex to the last in that original Pokedex, and I think that it speaks to a sense of development, I guess, certainly with the story you're telling us, and it's also a nice little nod to the Mewtwo and Gengar Generation 3 self-destruct explosion strategies.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I think that's I did put some thought in the ordering here. That's the thing. So I did use Mewtwo on my team. I got the self-destruct part right. I think I messed up the knocking out my opponent's Pokemon part right. That did not go as well. But it was fun. At least, I think not too many people can say that they got to use Mewtwo in their first in-person tournament and also won their first game, which is certainly more of a product of the era than any ability on my side. But it felt like the right way to get things started. It wasn't maybe the lesson was maybe to not use Mewtwo. I actually bought a Groudon plush from the event to remind me that like maybe next time use the good ones. It was still I did as best as I could with my guys.
Yeah, an iconic addition to the team. Mewtwo, welcome. And now we will side-strike from there into competing.
Yeah, so finally after that, I guess I got to experience the beginning of what the TPCI era competition is like. I think the Play Pokemon name had just been coined, so it was still a little different time. But I thought it was really cool. Where I think it's somewhat ambiguous where VGC actually started, whether or not you count the Video Game Showdown in 2008 or the 2009 events were kind of the beginning. I think officially it's 09, but I'm not going to argue with anyone on either side of that one. But 2010 was the first year where you didn't have to win a lottery to participate, where all the other events, the attendance is capped. There's far more people who were interested than could participate. And for me, living in Michigan, it was like basically the worst spot in the continental U.S. I could have lived in to try to attend one of the events, where there was like 6 and they were all kind of on the coast, and I was like dead center, and also there were lakes blocking me, so I can't even like straight line anywhere without a plane. So I didn't get to play until 2010, and at the time I wasn't even that interested. I had a lot of fun with like going down to Journey Across America and kind of the human side, but it didn't like really leave me with, all right, like I need to become a Pokemon world champion, in part because that concept didn't exist in 2006. So I went down in 2010 more just to meet people, right? Where it had been about 8 years for me of competing online in some capacity. I took a little break in the middle there, became addicted to the World of Warcraft, which I don't recommend my time management skills to anyone. But it was fun to kind of go back and just to see what these people were like in person. And, the socialization for me was the point. I ended up playing in the Last Chance qualifier. We used to have those back then. I went down to, I missed a key element here. So I didn't go to any of like the regional equivalents. I just went to US Nationals, which had a Last Chance qualifier before it. And I decided to play in that. It's like, you know what? I don't really care. Like, I'm not here to participate, but like, why not? So I played my first game of VGC in line as we were registering. So I did not succeed at my goal of preparing better. I actually somehow prepared worse. Huiha, the brother of eventual commentator Duiha, gave me a team. They were all nicknamed after the Teletubbies, so I really felt like I had the intimidation effect going in there. It was that famous Top Ogre team, so it was hopefully idiot-proof, right? You click Fake Out with Hitmontop, you click Water Spout with Kyogre, and then you wait patiently for your opponent's health bars to be depleted. I did not know a whole lot beyond that about VGC. My first battle online was actually, we played one practice game. It was me against Chaos, the webmaster of Smogon, so sort of strange way for like two bigger names at the time in the singles community, though not for battling or joining each other. For me, it's funny too. I could never beat him at singles. I had like a weird rock paper scissors thing where there were people that always beat him that I could always beat, but something about Chaos, he was always just in my head. His VGC team was less good. Unlike me, he'd had a plan for his team, and he'd requested that people build a very specific strategy for him. I no longer remember what this strategy was, but it was not a strategy intended to win. So I had a nice confidence booster in line where my powerful Pokemon defeated his like weird trick. Might have had like Executor or something, which I guess he was 2 years too soon. Who knew, right? But that was fun. I ended up getting to play in the LCQ, which was also single elimination. I think just like at Journey Across America, I ended up going 2-1. Just like Journey Across America, I actually ended up playing an eventual friend in the second round, Allison McDonald, who wound up being a regional champion herself a number of years later. I kind of feel bad in retrospect. She had a really cool team, but she was also kind of using some lower power stuff, and I kind of just clicked the power moves and overwhelmed her a little bit, even though she was playing a lot more tactically than I was. And then I just got absolutely destroyed by someone in round 3. And that was actually kind of what started to get me really interested. You know what? Like maybe this VGC thing is pretty neat, where he was using a bunch of Pokemon that were just like designed to hard counter what I was using. And I was really fascinated by that, where he had a like Crobat, I believe, which was also, was quick enough to be a problem, and also did, had that fake out. I think he still had the fake out immediately at the time, because I think Inner Focus only did that at that point. So it didn't work to fake it out, and it was quicker than Kyogre was, and things went downhill pretty quickly. I think it knew Sunny Day to immediately screw up the Water Spout shenanigans, and things were kind of just over before they started. But I stuck around. I had a great time, kind of just hanging out with people all weekend. Kind of meeting people I'd only ever met online, and then Saturday watching the tournament was where I fell in love. Where it's like, oh wow, like this. I'd kind of gotten bored by singles, right? And like, no disrespect to anyone who really enjoys those formats, but for me, it was just like I found the paths the battles went through kind of just weren't that inspiring to me anymore. I just love the creativity in double battles where people had kind of all these interesting strategies, and like even teams that looked really similar to me had these exciting outcomes. We're like, oh, the battle's supposed to go this way, but it didn't because these players made this interesting decision. I always remember the semifinal match that year, which again actually somehow involved another eventual commentator, where Len Duel was playing against, forget Deagle's real name. But they had a very exciting match, and ended up being the strange, I believe, 4-game set because the power went out during one of the games, and something that would just never happen nowadays. But there was a bunch of kind of like stranger Pokemon in that matchup where Deagle was kind of always known for training his Pokemon really irregularly and kind of trying to throw his opponents off. That was also the year where we didn't have battle boxes yet. Like that concept didn't exist until 2011, so like you couldn't lock your teams in. So you had to pick 6 Pokemon and 6 held items, but you were allowed to move the held items around. So at the time, that was also something I thought was super cool. I think in retrospect, I'm glad that isn't a thing. But like guessing where the choice scarf was every game is like, wow, like this is just a level of thought that I just don't have to deal with as a singles player. So that was really where things got started to me. It's hard to imagine kind of where my life would be if I hadn't decided to make that trip. Because, you know, again, it wasn't about competition, right? I was just like, oh, I'll go hang out for a weekend, and you know, here I am still talking about this game, you know, 15 years later.
Yeah, goodness me. So I really am, you know, from that story, getting the sense that at this point in your life, you were attending these events just for the social aspect and for the fun. It wasn't so much, you know, sure, you were learning things and you were improving, trying to get a little bit better each time. But it sounds at this point like you didn't really mind which way the battles went. Is that correct?
Yeah, not at all. Yeah, I mean, like, I think I kind of had my phase with singles where, like, I took it really seriously. I was, like, really concerned about my own results. Like, fortunately for me at the time, you know, there's barely any evidence of this, right? You know, we didn't even have, like, a ranked ladder concept back then, right? You know, so I guess success kind of had to be determined by how well I thought I was playing and whether I was winning or not, if I thought I was, like, if the other players respected me. And I think that's really what that point I cared about, right? It's like, do people respect me as a player? And then coming into this tournament, like, well, you know, like the people, I'd already earned that respect from the people I cared about. And the people competing in the tournament were kind of mostly the younger folks, right? It's like kind of folks who weren't from the old guard of competitive battling, but kind of would become the old guard of VGC, right? Where I think I met Ray Rizzo at that tournament, who I'd never even heard of him. I just really like especially the smaller community, right? Where for me, you know, my whole Pokemon experience either had been my local friends growing up that I went down to, Journey Across America with, and, you know, kind of even then, even though like Chalky would eventually become part of the greater community, you know, it was just like him and his best friend at the time and me and my best friend at the time talking on AOL Instant Messenger, you know, right? There was no like sense of like greater connection to like real people. And that was really got me inspired when I went down to nationals. Like, oh man, like it feels so different when it's a bunch of actual people that, like, after the tournament, it doesn't matter if we won or lost, you know, we can all, you know, have, dinner together and kind of just have fun and let loose. And it just, you know, the Pokemon's what got us all together, but it's not the only thing. And, you know, I think all of us kind of remember and forget that sometimes over the course of our careers and of individual seasons. But, it reminded me why I originally loved the game, right? Where it was like, I like the game and the world, but it's more about the interactions it lets me have with other people. And, I think that was where I really started getting close with some of the people that I'm still friends with now from the competitive side of the community, where I hung out with Evan Latt a whole lot that weekend. Obviously that wound up being a pretty important friendship for me, both in and out of Pokemon, where we did a lot together. But then, Evan wasn't a super hot player that year either, where his gimmick that year is he only used teams with Sunflora, which was a lot of fun and kind of another thing that just got me excited about VGC, because like you could just never get away with that sort of thing in singles, right? That's why there's the need for all the usage-based tiers, because in a 1v1 battle, it's so much easier just to kind of get overwhelmed, where certainly it's sort of the team I would make fun of now on stream maybe was like, oh, you know, in just 70 easy steps, Sunflora will sweep the match. But that it could even happen, I think, is super cool. And like watching a Sunflora one-shot, you know, Groudon or Kyogre is so funny to me. And it really, even though the battling wasn't it wasn't really what got me in. It was the combination of, liking the format a little bit more and mostly the interactions with the people. To me, that was still just like, man, this is just so much. It just feels like the upside of solving the puzzle is so much higher.
Well, thank you for that deep dive, Scott. And now it's time to introduce what's going to be Pokemon number 3 on the Dream Team alongside Blastoise and Mewtwo.
All right, so we're going to go a little bit different direction here, where we're going to move forward only one generation, though, and we're going to go with Politoed. And I was trying to think of a Pokemon that best represents kind of my career as a competitor. I thought about a Pokemon that we share a love for in Kingdra here, who was a member of my 2012 Worlds team as a partner in crime with Politoed. But for me, it was really important to pick Politoed because I enjoy Rain without Kingdra still. I think if I swap the Swift Swim Pokemon, I prefer Kingdra, but I'll use whatever. I hate playing Rain without Politoed. I just do not like the Pelipper version of a team, so Politoed gets to be my mascot for kind of that type of team where I think for me, it just reminds me of what I really liked as a player. Really, I love field effects, right? I kind of love just the switching in and out of battle and kind of like trying to keep combinations of effects going in your favor. Especially back then with the infinite weather, it was like such a big deal to try to knock out your opponent's weather setters so that you permanently have control. And I just really enjoyed that play style, especially as a player. I really enjoyed borrowing some strategies the Japanese players innovated for us. And one of the big things that they were starting to figure out was like the concept of using moves like Volt Switch, so you could, more easily cycle abilities in and out of battle. Obviously, that's become far more of a thing nowadays with moves like U-turn and Parting Shot to cycle Intimidate. But back then, we didn't really have that sort of powerful Intimidate Pokemon at quite the same level. But we did have, Politoed for weather teams, or I guess a little bit of Intimidate with like Hitmontop, who just was never quite the Pokemon that Incineroar has been. So I really fond memories of playing Rain. I wasn't quite a Rain one trick, but so my best memory as a competitor was 2012 Worlds, where I got 10th. So Politoed has earned his spot on my team.
Wonderful to tie in your preferred playstyle as well as a Pokemon you've seen some success with. These days, weather effects on the field that have various secondary effects for Pokemon in the battle will last 5 to 8 turns. But yeah, back then it would just stay on the field until it was overwritten. Politoed joining the Dream Team. Would you say that, obviously you've got a couple of water types on your team now. Is water your favourite type?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think it was. I was thinking about this too. Like, I actually really like this, this exercise of 6 Pokemon. I think probably one of the few guests where I've been thinking about this for years, where I just think it's such a fun hypothetical of like, well, if Pokemon are real, what 6 would I want? And like, maybe in real life I would focus on utility a little bit more. But I've noticed I'm very water biased. I always actually imagined myself being more of like an electric type guy, but I noticed the same thing. Or spoilers, 3 of the 6 are water types, and there's about 3 more that were pretty close. Where I don't know what it is. Where, and again, maybe the rain is some of it, but I don't know. I maybe there's more to pull from. Like I tend to be biased toward Pokemon that resemble real world animals a little more closely. None of the Toads I've encountered particularly similar to Politoed, so I'm really stretching this one. But I do think the water type have a lot of great representatives of kind of like realistic-ish animals that also for some reason can shoot water at you. Where, they could like splash in real life. It's, it's like kind of close maybe. I don't know.
I believe water is still, has always been the most populous type in terms of number of Pokemon that have some, be it individual water type or secondary water typing. And also, of course, it goes back to, once again, that Pokemon Blue version that kicked everything off for you. So Politoed, welcome to the team. We'll give you an encore now into Nugget Bridge.
I think one thing I realized is like, I really like this video game championships thing. I really think that Pokemon is starting to do something cool here, and I'd really like it if Pokemon were to start to become more like other esports. I was a big fan of League of Legends, at least as a spectator. I fell off of that wagon pretty quickly as a player, and it's like, wow, it's neat how sports like this is. I wonder if I can help Pokemon events kind of get bigger and do the same thing. And there's a lot of like-minded folks on the Smogon side, Evan Latt being a big one. Also, Rashan Shakar, who would eventually become our webmaster at Nugget Bridge, and kind of the rest of our crew. First we tried on Smogon. We're like, it'd be convenient, right? This website is huge. It's clearly the authority for competitive Pokemon on the internet. It'd be so convenient if they could just also do official stuff just the same way they do their own. We ultimately decided that the best route was to make our own website, both so that we could focus on VGC exclusively, but also kind of just like the brand stuff, right? Where I think one thing we thought would be cool is if, it'd be nice if Pokemon were comfortable posting here, and if parents were comfortable posting here. The other thing I thought was like really important that we did there is like, okay, well, one of the weaknesses, especially of the US, but I think kind of just of the West in general, is like you mentioned before, we have a huge geographic area that the community is spread between, right? And we probably have just as many serious players as Japan does, but not only is the country of Japan so much smaller of a geographic area, but also so many players are Tokyo based. And that allowed them to do some really neat things. I think led to them being a powerhouse, I guess not just early VGC, but kind of the whole time we've had VGC, where they've got their local events and they can share information in person. And we were like, okay, well, how can we do this, but on the internet, so that it's more widely available, it's easier for people to get into the game. And we kind of had two major tenets on Nugget Bridge we were kind of trying to approach that with. One was kind of the written editorial. It's one situation where, man, I wish I had my today's skills back then, where we did a lot of like team reports and that sort of thing, but also like meta reports and also kind of just tips to trying to improve at the game. It was a time when there wasn't any VGC on YouTube. I guess YouTube was also a little different place at that point, but it's just before you could go to Aaron Zhang's channel and see hundreds of battles and all of his great insight on what he was doing. It was before you had people like even Ray doing his content, right? There just wasn't really English language VGC content. So we tried to at least have an article every day. Evan in particular put a ton of work on the editing side there, where we wanted it to be somewhere where, hey, even if you're not a professional writer, or even if English isn't your first language, we will help you get your ideas out there. And I tended to be a little lazier on that front, where I contributed by writing, which, in retrospect, I put a lot of time into it. I don't know if I was helping kind of move things along quite as much as my fellow Nugget Bridge administrators were. And the tournament side was also something that we thought was important, where we had weekly live tournaments. I do not think we ever get anything close to what Victory Road does now, where I think that is one place where they've just absolutely lapped us. But we thought it was really important for players to have the opportunity to practice regularly. We had a similar concept to one thing they do now too, where every player we had like our own little circuit where there was able to qualify for like a final event with a prize money. We had a big annual event with prize money, similar to what Smogon was doing with singles. And I think we did a great job of at least giving players kind of an opportunity to improve. The thing I'm proudest of was, I think it was 2013, the Junior Division U.S. National Finals. And it was one of the Nugget Bridge administrators' sisters got to the final. And we were really trying to game the junior division via her, where all of her Pokemon only knew one move because she was very young. We did not feel like it was realistic to teach her to make decisions. So like, all right, we want you to go in here, click these buttons in this order. Like just or send these Pokemon in this order and then just time out. It's fine. The game will handle it. She'd get to the finals. It seemed like we had beaten the system. And her opponent was the little boy by the name of Bo Berg. And things did not go well for us in the final, where she won game one, kind of just sticking to the game plan. And then this other kid just made these incredible adjustments, right? Like he understood why he lost. He moved his Pokemon around. And he smokes her in game 2 and 3. And like, it's kind of weird. I'm like taping a demo reel for casting, which we can get into later, but it's, so I'm kind of rooting for Maylee, Paul Hornack's sister, but also like, man, this kid's great. Like this is way beyond what I expect from a junior. So I was really impressed. And I found out later that some of how we got better was that even though we were always imagining writing these articles for adult competitors, this kid who was like 11 or 12 was reading the articles on his own. He didn't have any older folks like significantly helping him prepare. And he understood well enough how to apply that to his own play that like he basically beat us by proxy. I thought it was just so cool like to see kind of the fruits of our labor, even though we were kind of defeated by them, where like, all right, we've clearly the opportunity exists for people to learn off of what we're doing, even though this didn't play out quite the way that maybe we were imagining that it would.
Wow. That's amazing. I guess, yeah, a whole concoction of emotions that you must have felt there, but also just, I guess, also excitement as to the future of competitive Pokemon, the fact that there are just more and more people joining and raising the game and showing you where Pokemon could go. So at this point, are you more sort of into competing yourself? Are you more on the side of wanting to have a good showing?
Very much the latter. And I don't think I really understood that for a few more years. But I think I realized pretty quickly, even on the Smogon side when I was competing, like, oh, it kind of sucks to be a known Smogon player and competing where, like, I just really need to make sure I don't embarrass myself at any event, right? And I think that always started adding some stress. And then Nugget Bridge, especially once we started growing and, like, I think toward the end of my competitor career, I think we were the place to go for VGC stuff. And, like, I thought it added a ton of stress for me, right? Where it's like, I don't really care if I win or lose. I just need to do well enough that, like, I don't make us look bad, that, like, I'm hurting the authority of what we're doing by me not being a good enough player. I thought, like, especially given that, my main contribution was like metagame recap type stuff. Like, well, if I want people to take me and by extension Nugget Bridge seriously, I have to be good enough as a competitor that people are going to buy that what I'm saying is true. And yeah, I hated it competing for a while for that reason, where I was always one of those people where at the end, like, I was never happy or sad based on how I did. I was just relieved if it was good enough. And yeah, I think in retrospect, I was playing a lot of teams where, like, I thought I was very likely to make it to top cut, but where I thought it would be very difficult for me to win top cut matches, where I was kind of like trending toward low variance teams just because, I needed to rack up the championship points, where I think it's telling where, like, even like 2013 was the first year of, like, championship points existing. And I was second in North America in championship points, but I'd never been to the finals of any event because I just wasn't set up to do that. Or, like, all right, I'm going to get the cut every time and then stuff's going to fall apart. But it felt like the optimal strategy.
I mean, it sounds like you were better than you're making yourself out to be if you were second in the tables. I realize that's just the accumulation over many events, as opposed to going all the way in any one of those.
My teammates at Nugget Bridge, I kind of had jobs, right? Evan was really the one who ran the editorial. I gave some input. He was really strong there. I think Evan has a lot more, like, background to this sort of thing than people realize, but, like, I was a parent who was a newspaper editor and maybe a columnist. He'll have to yell at me later. He had some radio experience too, right? So he's kind of trained on both written and spoken media. We eventually did some tournament streams as well, where that was kind of how the other thing that I guess we got started at Nugget Bridge, where I didn't have that, right? Rashawn was kind of the one who was making all the difficult editorial decisions. He was kind of doing all the outreach. He was the one who posted, like, news rather than editorial. He did a lot of work there. We had one friend who kind of ran the Wi-Fi section of the forum so that he could help people, like, acquire Pokemon and make trades and, like, be ready to compete. Another friend, I think mentioned Paul Hornack's sister. Paul was the one who kind of ran the tournaments, and I was really just there kind of as a little more of a figurehead. I was, writing, but also, like, I was the one who was supposed to be good. And since I wasn't contributing nearly as much as everyone else did, I felt like I was really letting the team down if I wasn't competing well, because, what else was I doing, really? It's just that, and then eventually helping with the broadcast. So I put a lot of pressure on myself for that reason, and I think I've kind of realized as I got older too, I was fine as a competitor, right? I think I was a little hard on myself, but, like, I think I was, like, somewhere between good to great, was probably never going to get to excellent, where the kids love that phrase, like, certain competitors that got that dog in them. And I always joke that I think I had 0 dogs. There were no dogs inside me. There might not even have been cats. Where I think you're just like a killer instinct that great competitors have, where they just want it a little bit more than everyone else. And I just didn't have that. Where, like, I had the one positive competitor trait where, like, I definitely hated losing more than I liked winning, which I think is important. But I might have hated winning too. I just wanted the competition to be over. I think I just didn't like the actual competition part enough. Where, like, I love the afterwards. I love the preparation. I love, like, the thinking about the game. I never loved playing the game as much.
That's really interesting. Okay, well, we'll put that there and now introduce what's going to be Pokemon number 4 alongside Blastoise, Mewtwo, and Politoed.
Alrighty. Well, I figured for this one, I would pick the Pokemon that kind of most reminded me of the community of that era, right? I think if I think back to Nugget Bridge, what I'm most proud of is that we kind of brought everyone together. And I think this Pokemon's more of a meme on Smogon than Nugget Bridge, but it kind of reminds me of that initial group of players, and that's Jellicent of all Pokemon. Pokemon Black and White was the last core RPG where it was not localized and released simultaneously. So we all had to play it in Japanese first, or at least, read coverage of it in Japanese before it came to the US and Europe as well. And because of that, the VGC community had already been established, right? 2010 was kind of really the year that broke out. So that would have been the very end of the Diamond and Pearl era, even though we were actually playing on Heart Gold and Soul Silver. So we were all eagerly anticipating Black and White, and we were following everything that we could to try to get ahead on VGC stuff. And Jellicent kind of just became a meme because it was so ridiculous looking, really. Like, it really had nothing to do with combat. The male Jellicent looking like the Pringles Man was also kind of just a running gag. And it just brings me back to an era where we were so excited about the next generation of VGC and kind of what the future might hold. And I don't think any of us in our wildest dreams could have imagined the 15 years that would follow. But I like to remember times with the brand where I was more excited, right? It was not, the older I get, the more cynical I get and the more I've seen. And it's probably the most starry-eyed I've ever felt in VGC. It reminds me of a lot of my close friends at that time. So even though I'm not sure Jellicent was ever a Pokemon that I would use in competition, and actually one that quite frequently defeated me as one of the signature Pokemon of the Midwest's best player at the time in Zach Drokamp, I still love Jellicent as a character.
That's a fascinating way that's tied in, and as you say, your third water type on your team. Are you going to be adding the male or the female Jellicent here?
I'm going to go male. I apologize to my friends who all prefer the female Jellicent, but it's just so pink, right? I know some folks have real strong opinions about this one with Gastrodon. I'm a little bit more pink Gastrodon curious. With Jellicent, I'm real firm. I prefer the male one. The pink one's just too much for me.
I see. Okay. Well, Jellicent, welcome to the team. And now we will hydro on from there into now the early casting days.
Yeah, I guess so. This is I don't know, maybe the most exciting time for casting, but I think a lot of people are probably aware. So the first year that the Pokemon World Championships was broadcast was in 2012. Which was not broadcast by Pokemon, but instead by GameSpot, a company that they hired to do it. And the metagame knowledge of these casters was perhaps not what it would be if it was community enthusiasts doing it instead. I think people are actually a little harsh on them in the sense, I know they tried to prepare because Chalky had just written an article for Nugget Bridge shortly before this event where he went back to Journey Across America's mechanics and kind of wrote a retrospective. And he wrote about some mechanics that no longer were in the game. I don't remember specifically what happened, but if you go back and watch that stream, the GameSpot commentators get a mechanic wrong because they clearly had read Chalky's article, not understood that it was for a past format and not the current one, and then misquoted the current mechanic. So they did research, but it was bad. It was really bad. It was so bad that you'll notice for the finals, a poor Pokemon employee was abducted and asked to help out with the broadcast a little bit to reel the brand back in a little bit. But I got a text message at the time. That was the worlds I played in. And I was having the weekend of my life, but Evan was at home watching the stream and he was just like, we got to fix this. So became our dream of joining the official Pokemon broadcast. Not so much because either of us wanted to be broadcasters, especially, but because we wanted to see the game grow, and we just thought that it couldn't happen if this is what the official stream was going to be. At the time, I was still, believed myself to be enjoying competing, although as I get older, as I mentioned before, I think I've learned I actually wasn't enjoying competing, but I was maybe engaged with competing as a positive spin. And I was expecting, okay, well, I have no broadcast experience. It's been, 13 years since then. I'm still not really comfortable in front of a camera. It's going to take us some time before we get to the point where Pokemon will even consider us. So we'll start doing streams on Nugget Bridge. to try to both improve our skills, but also to raise some visibility. And, maybe someday we can try to help fix the stream quality issue that we felt like Pokemon clearly had at that point. The timeline, as most folks probably know it now, is that actually it was the following World Championships that got broadcast, not 1, 2, or 3 years later, the way we were imagining at the time, which put me in a difficult spot because, we come up to the U.S. Nationals that year in 2013. Like I said, I'm second in championship points. I have no reason to believe the broadcast thing is a thing. And I'm just thinking, all right, if my goal maybe as a stretch goal in 2014 is to be on the broadcast, it'd be great if I had a good season. It'd be great if I had a good Worlds to kind of put myself out there a little bit more. I did pretty well at the previous Worlds, but that was kind of a fluke. I LCQ'd in. So to me, that means less. So I want to try and prove that I can do this the way that it's supposed to be done. And it was pretty close to, maybe it may have only been like a week out of Nationals where we got messaged by Pokemon. It was like, hey, we kind of want to do a test recording at Nationals if you're going to be there. You probably can't compete if we're going to do this, but we want to see how this would go. You see if we like it. Maybe we can do something for real at Worlds. So we go to Nationals. I have a team anyway because I heard so late that I'd been preparing as if I was going to compete. It was the first time I'd ever gotten number 1 on the ladder, which is not because I was especially good at that format, in my opinion. It was because The Last of Us had just come out, and my friends and I were playing multiplayer, and I am a truly awful player. So I would die so quickly, so frequently, that I would queue games while I waited for the match to finish. And this happened so many times that I accidentally got to number 1 on the ladder because I was really bored. But I did become very prepared for that because of that. And I was really excited to see how I would do. As it turned out, I got to play a little bit. They weren't ready to do the recording immediately. So I was like, hey, I'd registered anyway. Can I play? Yeah, sure. So I played Swiss. I think I got to 6-1. I was like, I need to drop. I ran into a friend in the 8th round. I think I was up 3-1, and then I accidentally clicked the run button. I don't know what happened. I took a loss that round. Not so great. All right, still not ready to record. I guess I'll play round 9 of Swiss. Why not? It'll be fun. I needed to win that round to move on, but I didn't really want to move on. All right. I ran into a guy with Bright Powder and Garchomp. All right, this got top 4 at U.S. Nationals the previous year. The community was kind of upset because they thought it made the game look bad. Yeah, I'm going to do my best. Win or lose, if this is going to make it to top cut again, it's going to go through me first. I had Hidden Power Flying in my Landorus. I ran into a Breloom. I thought there was almost no chance I was ever actually going to get to use that move. I got my one shot. I got my win. Was very excited. Top 32 starts. Still not ready to record. I can play a top cut game. Why not? I thought it was super fun. I played someone that round. It was the 3rd time we'd played in top cut. There's only 4 events that year, right? It was 3 regionals. They all happened the same weekend, so you couldn't play. There's 3 regional groupings, I guess, in fall, winter, and spring. You can only play in 1 because they were all the same weekend. I'd played him in top cut of 2 regionals, and then again at U.S. Nationals. Man, I feel like it would really be cheating him out of our arc here if I just forfeited this game, right? We have to do it. So we had a really great 3-game set. I get through that one too. Finally, I dropped to do this test recording. I ended up doing a game no one ever saw. It was just for a VOD I think Tiffany Stanley. I forget who she's playing against. It might have been Stephen Morioka. Actually, it's a really cool game. It's a shame that we didn't get to broadcast. Or I believe she had Virizion on her team, which Pokemon we don't get to see too often. But recording goes fine, I guess. We do finals. I think that one we had in-arena audio, but no stream. So like I mentioned, the junior finals for that one, I could have gone better for my circle of friends, although it really taught me not to underestimate junior division players, which was pretty good insight going forward. We got to watch, I think the Masters final that year was really cool, where it was, I can't say his name, human, as I would say, who would have knocked me out of a tournament if I kept going anyway. It's an unwinnable matchup. I would have gotten beat at best in top 4 against Gavin Michaels. So 2 players who wound up continuing to do well. Pretty fun game. I believe that one is on YouTube somewhere. You probably can't hear our audio, but I do recommend the match. I think that was the Rhydon year. So a lot of Pokemon that were pretty unexpected doing well that year. Whatever, time goes on. I'm preparing for Worlds like I'm going to compete because we don't hear anything. We find out a couple weeks before the tournament that actually we are going to do a broadcast. And I guess the rest is history. It wound up being super cool. I think it was an honor to get to be a part of the very first broadcast. We only did Top Cut that year, and it was only one round from each tournament. I think my personal favorite story from it is we were freaking out because we thought we knew the metagame really well, right? Like I was super prepared to compete that year. I think I would have done pretty decently. I did decently at nationals and at regionals. I thought I had super locked down. And it was eventual world champion Sajin Park who really created some problems for us there, where he had Magmar on his team. And I just remember leaning over to Evan and like, what the heck does Magmar do? So I think we literally opened Cerebi up on our phones. Like, why does he have this Pokemon? It's like way before the days of online team sheets or whatever. So we're hearing about this rogue Magmar in the field. Like, what is going on here? We did end up seeing it on stream, where I think Seijin made it to top 8 there against Ryosuke Kosuge, who had that famous match with Aaron Zhang around afterward, which I guess was the first famous match I got to do. Sorry, Aaron, where he missed I believe 1 or 2 Will-O-Wisps in that match, but. Very memorable weekend. Super cool to be a part of all of it. I was really rooting for 2-game sets that whole weekend, where I think nowadays I always complain or like, oh, I feel like every time I go up there, it's only a 2-gamer. I never get to cast. Where back then I was like, please just be over before I can do anything wrong. But it wound up being a lot of fun.
Wow, fascinating to get your perspective on that. So you said going in that you didn't sort of you hadn't had much broadcast experience and you weren't entirely sure about being on camera. But did you find the casting more enjoyable than you were anticipating?
I think I enjoy it. I still think I'm just not a technically proficient caster. I think real adult me, like post 30, probably got a little less weird in front of the camera, but I'm just not going to be good, right? I haven't put the time in. I did like a week of YouTube once, and I couldn't believe how much better speaking in front of the camera it made me. And it's just a skill that I haven't put as much work in to hone as everyone else. And deservedly, I'm just not as strong, I think just of a speaker in general, but especially on camera as other folks are. I think once we get in the games, I feel pretty good, right? Especially back then where I was a little stronger as a player, as an active competitor. And the flow of the game is something we thought about a lot when we were thinking about the concept of Pokemon broadcasting. I guess even before we were actually streaming, it's not like we had videos to look at for how other people were casting the game, right? Like there were no real broadcasts of the Pokemon video game. So it's like, well, what is this even like? Like who should be talking when? What sort of things should we say? We likened it a lot eventually to American football just because of the flow of play, right? Where it's like 40 seconds of action and then 40 seconds of nothing. And Pokemon kind of flows that similarly, where you get the action during the play, where usually you have one broadcaster kind of explaining what's happening and maybe reacting appropriately with excitement when something has occurred, and then kind of explaining the whys and the what's about to happen between turns. I think having a clearer job made things a little bit easier for me. It's like, all right, probably at this point, you really don't want me trying to tell jokes. You don't want me trying to do traffic. You just want me sitting there doing my best to analyze the Pokemon game and then desperately shutting up before I can put my foot in my mouth. And I was relatively comfortable at that part. It's funny to look back where, I seem to have no idea where the camera is. The eyes are always the wrong place. I still get made fun of a ton for gesturing strangely. I think my favorite comment, which I think is actually very accurate, was Scott's like a robot pretending to be a human, which I think is almost exactly what I was doing wrong. Not pretending to be a human exactly, but I was so overthinking all the things I was doing that everything was really stiff and fake looking in a slightly crazy way just because I couldn't act naturally on camera and was overcompensating way too much. It's funny to look back on. It's I'm still bad, but I'm comfortable bad, and I think that comes off better. But yeah, it was very funny to go in, especially because we'd had practice with the verbal part of it, casting online, but none of the Nugget Bridge streams even had a camera, right? I don't think I even owned one, and still I started doing Zoom interviews once I got out of college. So yeah, it was an experience to say the least.
We are our own harshest critics, though, and, hearing all of these things, I would not have known that you had this, you don't feel like you're good on camera, so, but it's great to hear that you doing a bit of YouTube helps with that, and that you have settled into things. So, had you and Evan decided fairly early on that Evan would do more of that play-by-play side of things and you do more of the analysis?
Yeah, I think we just felt like it suited kind of where we were with Pokemon at that point. I think I'd always been a little bit more serious about the competing part, where Evan was always like a build around his favorite sort of a guy. I think he's a far better player than anyone realizes. I think just as like a mechanical battler, like he's always been just as good as I was. And I think there's been a long period more recently where I think he was better than me, where I put my foot off the gas a little bit too much. But he just didn't get the tournament results because he was just not willing to use meta teams, right? He was going to do it his own way or not at all. I always really liked that about Evan as a person. But I think both because I think he felt more comfortable in the play-by-play role because he didn't have the tournament results. And also because he, like I said, he had radio experience. He's just so much better in front of the camera and kind of just understands the flow of running a show so much better than me. I think he was, also always the one who had to do interviews for us, where I think they had me do like one once, and afterward the producer came over and was like, yeah, let's not do that again. Like, you're right, let's not. And for me on the other side of it, I think for me it was just covering up weaknesses, right? It was the job I could do. It was easiest for me because I could just do the one thing I knew, right? Where I've always just been very passionate about competitive Pokemon, and I don't know that I've ever had any real ability to explain it succinctly, so instead I have to explain it quickly. But I love it, right? And it's just easier for me to do that sort of thing, where I think older me can do both. And like, I kind of like the double analyst duos every once in a while now, where obviously we tend to be a little lower energy when we use that sort of composition.
Well, from there now, let's learn what's going to be Pokemon number 5 on your dream team alongside Blastoise, Mewtwo, Politoed, and Jellicent.
I have to go with one. I think it's a Pokemon I slightly, not mistakenly, but I went with as my favorite Pokemon as on our Worlds video, even though it isn't quite true, but it's Cresselia. It is the Pokemon that reminds me the most of myself, in the sense of it was such a key figure in old VGC, right? And I always love, it plays into my love of making fun of myself so well, where it is the Pokemon I use most frequently. Like, I love the Trick Room Switch teams where I think the modern teams where you have both Trick Room and Tailwind maybe are a step too far for me. But I used to really like the older teams where you had like a fast mode where you could fight outside of Trick Room and often had like the fastest natural Pokemon, but then also could use something like Volt Switch to get a slower Pokemon out while you were Trick Rooming with Cresselia. And Cresselia is still the best we've ever had in that job. It was just so difficult to knock out. Ice Beam was so effective against Garchomp and Salamence, who were so prevalent in that format as well, where like you could play a lot of nice roles. And to me, Cresselia both represents an older area of VGC in which it was the most commonly used Pokemon, but also just like a tempo of the game, right? Where the games were a little slower back then, where like average turn length was probably 4 or 5 turns longer than it is nowadays, which even that is a little bit longer than it has been with some past moves like Z moves or Dynamax kind of sped the game up a little bit. And I liked it being a little more slower and methodical. Cresselia doesn't hang as well as it used to. I know there were some teams, I think last year of it, at least could kind of make it work. But, I'll always remember the times that we shared together, even if neither of us get the spotlight quite what we used to. So, Cresselia, you can always be washed up with me.
Cresselia, I'm representing that era so well. And this means that your team currently is entirely Water and Psychic. I mean, Jellicent is also a part Ghost type. But would you say that Psychic is your second favorite type?
No, it's just those two. All the others suck, okay. But there's this two. Yeah, that's weird. Yeah, 2 Psychic type legendary Pokemon as well. So what I need them to do is make more Psychic type legendary Pokemon and fewer Psychic type everything else. Latios is not my final pick, but it's another one I thought about selecting. Really enjoy it both as a character and also as a fellow member of the 2012 team with Politoed and Cresselia. So yeah, more legendary Psychic types, please.
Mm-hmm. And at this point, coming back to a question that I asked earlier, obviously you're even deeper into the competitive side of things at this point in your life than you have been before. But again, are you still enjoying playing the games as they are? Are you maybe still watching the movies, for example?
Yeah. Yeah, it was weird. Or I think I had a curve. I think my low point would have been like probably early Ruby Sapphire, where I was like starting to lose touch. I think I was actually losing touch so much I did not even realize Ruby and Sapphire had released until I saw them at the store. I did still immediately purchase it, but I was a little out of the loop there. And I think that one, like, I didn't watch the animation. I wasn't, I played through the games once, but I wasn't like super into it. And then I guess it was really going down for Journey Across America. So I triggered it back the other direction where I was so excited about Diamond and Pearl. I did import the game in Japanese, even though I cannot read Japanese. I think that had a negative impact on my experience where it took me a long time to actually finish it in English again, where those games are always going to be a little strange to me. But yeah, from then on, I did watch the animation again, at least the beginning of that generation. And then I was kind of all in again once Black and White rolled around. I know a lot of folks, it was tough for them because it was kind of a reset with none of the returning Pokemon appearing during the story. But I really love those games. I thought it was cool how it's maybe like Pokemon's most serious JRPG where they were trying to tell a little bit different story than they normally do. And while, N's ideas maybe run conflict to a lot of the established conventions of the Pokemon world, I thought it was really cool that they were kind of willing to present an idea of like, well, is it ethical to have this relationship with Pokemon? And obviously, you're reassured that no, your Pokemon do love you; they are happy to be here. But I'd always kind of, again, kind of with your prompt of, what would your 6 Pokemon dream team be? I always think sometimes too, would the 6 Pokemon be happy being on my dream team, right? And like Mewtwo, probably not. I don't think he would be so into it. But like, yeah, it does give me some comfort to think that the Pokemon would be into it too. I thought the game exploring that was super neat. And then, I think every generation after that, I kind of got more and more back into it. I really liked, the launch week of Pokemon X and Y is one of my favorite memories playing the game. Both because I remember I was the first in my group of friends to get to Elite Four, and I think I get hit with one of those O-Powers every single turn, where it just like was a running gag where everyone was spamming me with all of the resources. So it was a little unfair for the poor Elite Four, where something ridiculous was happening with some divine intervention for me every turn. But it was a fun bonding moment, and then. I was remembering it again with all the Malamar nonsense that has just gone on with the reveal of Mega Malamar. But gosh, it felt like the playground rumors again with the evolution for Malamar that weekend, or like, turn my DS upside down. You think I'm going to fall for that? But it was true. And I thought that really, for me, brought the magic back.
Cresselia, welcome to the team. But before we round out your dream team, now let's talk about Pachirisu and going up to today.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like this is a pretty good topic, right? Where, I've been fortunate to get to cast a number of like sort of famous early year matches. Like I try and forget about the Aaron Zing Will-O-Wisp game, but Evan and I were there for that too. But certainly the Pachirisu game, I think, is a big one for a number of reasons. Like it's still the most famous game in VGC history. And I think I both love and hate it in the sense that, I feel like we've always been stuck in its shadow, and I'm kind of hopeful, last year with the big arena and everything that maybe we're entering a new era. But if there's like a single match that I feel like is emblematic of like the before times where, maybe from the first TPCI stream until last year's Worlds, it's certainly Pachirisu, right? We just saw it on a t-shirt in the regional championships a couple of weeks ago as we're recording this. And there'll never be another Pachirisu, right? I thought it was super cool to get to be there for that. I think for me, it was also the day as a caster where I was like, you need to take this more seriously, where I'm not going to say like I didn't appreciate it enough, but like, I think I was a little bit in my prima donna phase then, to the extent I ever had one, where like, I don't know, like some things that weekend weren't going my way and I was kind of being a bad sport about it. I remember just like waking up that morning and like, looking in the mirror in the hotel room as I'm getting dressed, it's like, you know what, like, there are thousands of people who would love to be getting to do what you're doing right now. Like, you owe it to the opportunity you're getting to take this a little bit more seriously. And I'm really glad I locked in, because certainly I did not realize that a few hours later I would be, again, doing maybe the current most famous match in VGC history. But it was a good time to be on. And I think there's just so many things about that match that were so cool. I appreciate the video that we show on stream sometimes about this match that Joe Brown did. Where it's a little bit of a misunderstood match, where I think people always want to assume that Pachirisu was Sajin's favorite Pokemon, and it's his favorite Pokemon now, but it's because of that match, right? I think it was just such a cool choice because it beat people's solutions to the solutions of the format so well. where, the other side of the field, his opponent had his Rotom to try to get around Amoonguss that everyone was using to redirect. And then it's kind of like a step beyond that Pachirisu could counter that. So some of that stuff will also just, redirecting attacks away from the powerful Pokemon beside it, as we saw. It's crazy to think back, right? Where I remember the day after that match, I was walking by the venue. I'd stayed in DC for a couple of other days, and like the convention center had just gone back to normal. And like, it's like, man, it's really weird to be back, kind of like, as if it never happened. But it just feels like a game where like it's never going to be the same again, even though the decorations have all taken down. Inflatable Pikachu has vanished back into the ether, and it's crazy, right? Where I think I knew at the time it was something big, but I would never have believed, we'd still be talking about it now. I think I was interviewing someone once, and it came up, and like, wow, like, this is a very unrelated feeling conversation, but it's like the first thing so many people learn about VGC. Like, it's the first entry point, and it was one of those things that made me really glad that we'd put the work in to try to get on the official stream too, because I just think, I don't know that we needed to be there to elevate the match, but I feel like if it had gotten commentary like 2012, it really would have detracted from the match, right? And I think, to me as a commentator, the most important thing we could do is kind of just get out of the way. Like, all right, we should help people enjoy the match more, but ideally the less they're thinking about us, the better. And I'm glad we were able to avoid ruining that moment, because VGC might never be the same without that match.
For an unfamiliar, I mean, you've given such a good explanation there, Scott, but I guess the fundamental thing is that Pachirisu just sort of came out from nowhere to then win those World Championships in 2014. Cute little electric squirrel just defines competitive Pokemon to this day. Speaking of to this day, I mean, that was back in 2014. There have now been, and again, I'm sorry to remind you of years passing, and you've continued to cast, and as you said, I think you said it's in total 9 World Championships that you've commentated. So I guess, how have your feelings and thoughts around casting developed in that time?
I mean, I peaked early, right? It's never going to be as high as there, so we're all just vibing now. I mean, like, I think for me, some things have changed, right? I think maybe owing back to the same way I felt as a competitor. I think I was a lot more concerned at that point with like how especially competitive players would perceive what I was saying. I think I was trying too hard to sound smart, and I think it kind of went against my own goals, and I kind of eventually, especially I took a couple of years off where I didn't cast at all from 2016 Worlds until 2018 US Nationals or NAIC. I forget what it was that year. I think still US Nationals then. And let me step back. Like, my goal was always, I want to help grow this thing. I want to help more people appreciate this. Like, I want the competitive players to get their spotlight. And I kind of realized, like, well, I don't need them to like me to make that happen, right? Like, they're not really my audience. It's the folks who tune in less frequently, or maybe this is their very first stream, and helping make sure that they have a good experience so they tune back in, so they're more excited about these competitors. I mean, that's really how I can help them, right? Where it's like, I don't need to impress anybody while I'm up there. I just need to make sure that I'm helping the match along. Like, I'm explaining what's important, but not like, first, I try not to make too many predictions, right? I think that's one thing that I was good at at first, but like not necessarily adding to the match so much, or like I don't love like, I think this player should do this sort of commentary too much. Because if they don't, then you're like, oh, we've gone down a very difficult to explain path now. But also like it's not about me, right? And like I think that's especially on the analyst side, I think it's a super important thing to remember. I think sometimes the casters feel like, oh, I'm an analyst, but even like some of the play-by-play casters, I think like they see like prestige on the analyst side, and I think that it's kind of important for us to kind of discourage that. We're like, we're just up here presenting a game, right? The competitors are competing. We're providing a show to help make that more accessible. And I think some time away helped me kind of triangulate that a little bit.
Sure. Okay. And then, of course, we have the pandemic. And then post that, I guess, yeah, so it seems like just since then, the momentum has really been gathering with Pokemon winning its sales right up to now 2025 Worlds in Anaheim, where Championship Sunday took place in an arena with around 5,000 capacity. So looking back from now, would you have ever imagined that this could be where Pokemon would have reached?
Oh no. It's funny how I mention how much I believe that it couldn't to people sometimes, and I can't believe the people who try to bluff me that they could. Or I don't believe anyone who says that they thought that we were going to get here. Recently I dug up the photo of like the way our booth looked when we were first recording at U.S. Nationals in 2013, and like, it's like a card table with a tablecloth over it, right? Like there might have been classier looking tables in the concession area. And then, from that to the LED floor, like there's just no way, man. Like not in my wildest dreams. I think it's super cool to have gotten to be some part of that. And like, I meant to be done twice, right? Like I thought I was going to be done in 2016, where I just like wanted to step away and focus on helping the event in other ways, and wound up getting dragged back. And then the same thing happened during the pandemic, where like, I didn't mean to stop casting, where like it just didn't make any sense to use me remote during the pandemic. Like if UIC had happened that year, I would have cast that. So like I was all in, and then I went from that to like done, except for unfortunately the pandemic part of the pandemic. A bunch of the casters wound up not being able to cast Vancouver regionals on really short notice, and it's like, well, I'm going to be there to hang out anyway. In a weirdly similar situation to how I started playing in 2010. So sure, why not? I'll help cast the event. We had to fly poor Adam Doricott in, where he was supposed to be on injured reserve, but he's there with his broken arm and his sling, and is like clearly not in a place where he should have been casting, but just trooping through. Like, all right, this guy's casting injured. The least I can do is pretend I know what's going on in this format. But I've been around a little bit since. It has been super awesome to get to help the stream go from such a small thing where, it was, again, we had nothing, unless you count whatever it was that GameSpot was doing, into, kind of growing the Pachirisu game, kind of getting more and more audience into, we had like the bigger stages, right? I think even the first year that we had the caster booth out in the audience, like that was crazy. I always remember the London set too, where we had the series of booths all out in the stadium. I thought that was like a super cool look. And, like I mentioned at the very beginning, trying to be more like the esports was one thing I really dreamed of Pokemon having someday. And that was the one time I was like, I really feel like we're starting to achieve this. It's neat, right? Where, no one's going to get to be part of it the whole way, but I think I got to see so much of it over the course of a decade that, I'm grateful for it, right? Where when I stopped competing, I never imagined that I would be able to help us do this.
Yeah. And do you feel proud of yourself?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's, I'm glad that I got this far without ever gaining any real ability. No, yeah, I mean, it's neat. Like, this is what I wanted, right? Where the goal was never like, I want to cast Masters finals for 15 years in a row, and I want a plaque for how great I was. Like, that was never what I was looking for, right? Where I think I learned that, like, I kind of like, I remember as a kid, if you listen to the NPCs talking in Red and Blue, Agatha is like, oh, I can't believe Professor Oak just became a professor. He doesn't battle anymore. That old coot, like, not like me. I'm still battling. And I remember as a child, I was like, yeah, she's right. That man's crazy. But I totally get it, right? Where I'm very much kind of in that place where it was neat to get to be a part of this for so long, and now to help other people have their own adventures, right? And there's so many people who are competing now that are getting to have these great experiences with Pokemon. Hopefully they're getting to make like great lifelong friends like I got to make. And I think helping build the program has just been so much more fulfilling to me than it would have been as a competitor, right? Like, I don't think I was this sort of guy that was going to win a world championships. But if you give me the options, like, you can win worlds, but Pokemon VGC is 1/10 the size it is now, or the present, like, absolutely worth it, right? And like, don't get me wrong, like, I think we get exactly the same place whether or not I ever broadcast a match, but it's cool to have gotten to be a part of it in the timeline that we were in.
Mm-hmm. Well, on behalf of the community, thank you so much for everything that you've done towards it, and help being a crucial part in making it what it is today. Now, we got to segue into what's going to be the final Pokemon rounding out your dream team.
My actual favorite Pokemon, it's Raikou. I love it. I don't like saying it on stream because it's one of those Pokemon where a number of people do not know the official pronunciation, and like I don't need that fire from Twitch chat. But for me, it's a two-pronged. I mean, one, it was my trademark Pokemon in singles when I first. It's not when I first started competing, which would have been at the end of Gold and Silver, but like when I became good in. I tried to air quote there, but my hand was too far to frame. So imagine when I started becoming a serious player in Ruby and Sapphire, I was like the substitute Calm Mind leftovers nonsense where it was a cheesy but simple win condition, and I basically used that Raikou teams exclusively for a solid like year there, and I like remembering a time where I did really care about competition, right? And Raikou kind of represents that for me. It does kind of follow my theme of being somewhat a real animal that also has magic for some reason. But it brings me back to a different part of my childhood, I guess.
And Electric joins the team, so I do have some diversity there in terms of the typing. And do you remember, before you had that competitive experience with Raikou, do you remember, as soon as you'd seen it when you were playing Gold and Silver for the first time, liking the Pokemon?
Yeah, absolutely. I never caught one in Gold and Silver where child me just could not quite grasp the traveling Pokemon thing where they all would they would spawn in a specific route every time you flew, and like they'd move once every time you moved once. You'd have to kind of move into them, and then like their health would carry over from encounter to encounter, but they would run away immediately if they got to take a turn, and it was all quite arduous, and I never quite did it as a kid. Some of why I did not finish my Pokedex the second round of games. So I was very excited when I finally got one. I think it was Pokemon Coliseum probably, where I would have gotten the purified Raikou from that game. So I still have it. Actually, it's still in my Pokemon home where I've used it to go through a number of different RPGs where as I said, go through it is an exaggeration. It's level 100, so there's only so much going through we can do. But like battle tower type stuff, I try to whip it back out. I was like, all right, will substitute Calm Mind work this time? And like, no, usually is the answer. But we try our best. I don't have like a whole lot of individual Pokemon that have actually come with me the whole way. But yeah, my Raikou, who's older than everyone in the juniors division, and I believe everyone in the senior division, is still with me.
Wonderful. Well, this means, Scott, that your overall dream team is Blastoise, Mewtwo, Politoed, Jellicent, Cresselia, and Raikou. It speaks to your heritage in the competitive game. And again, a lot of Water, a lot of Psychic, but Raikou is your overall favourite. Well, fascinating. And now I have to ask you, which of these Pokemon would you choose to be your partner Pokemon?
Mewtwo, I'm taking over the world.
That's your answer.
Yeah. I honestly probably Blastoise, right? It just feels more appropriate. You got like the brand thematic partner. But I do. Mewtwo would have a lot of advantages. Like the mind control thing probably a little much. Like I think there's that's definitely a crime. Like even in the world of Pokemon, you can't do that. But I don't know. I think the problem, like Raikou would be more appealing. Again, it is my favorite, but like. I was kind of like imagine riding it like a horse, but like it simply wouldn't work, right? Like first of all, it's going too fast. I would fall off for sure. I think it's probably like the saddle thing wouldn't really work. It's pretty like wide. There's a lot of logistical problems. Also, the running away. Also, how would you feed something like that? I bet you it eats a lot. Munchlax just missed my list, and even that, like I don't know. Like he's a little guy, but he eats a lot. Like, it's a good thing Pokemon aren't real.
Well, I like, and I guess I'm not surprised by how practical you've made the question. I guess Blastoise does make the most sense there. So I guess we'll go with Blastoise. Interesting that we cycled through 3 of your Dream Team members to settle on that one. But now I have to ask you a different kind of question, Scott. If you were a Pokemon, based on everything we've heard about you up to now, everything you know about yourself, what do you think you would be?
I'm trying to think. I was cycling through bad ones on purpose. You know what? Let's go with Gengar, actually. I kind of like the it's the shadow Pokemon. It likes to hide in the background a little bit. A bit of a prankster. I feel like, I don't know, but I've got a prankster in me. I guess he doesn't have the prankster ability, but he's thematically prankster. But I feel like the snark is certainly an overly represented part of my personality. I think, I had a tough year, and I think I realized how much I use humor to deflect. So I think a jokier Pokemon that, maybe is ever present, but trying to not be too much in the spotlight probably is representative of what I shoot for, at least.
Gengar, no, I think, Gengar's cheeky grin certainly makes me think of you. That makes sense for me, but what do you all think? Do you agree that of all the Pokemon there are, Scott would be a Gengar? We would be fascinated to read, so do drop a comment. And speaking of you all, it's now time for your community questions. Posted online, as I always do, asking for questions for my guests. Thank you so much for submitting them. I apologise I won't have time to feature all of them, and if I mispronounce any of your names or handles. To kick things off here, Nightwing VGC echoes what I said before in offering their gratitude to you for your contribution to the community. We'd just like to know, how did it feel casting Worlds for the first time?
Terrifying. Yeah, I think it became exciting later, like way later. But I think I was just scared 13, 14, 15. It makes me miss a trip. I think 15 was the first point where it became exciting because I'd kind of forced myself to accept this is a cool opportunity. Like, you need to look at the positives and not just the negatives. My glass is always 2/3 empty, no matter how much liquid is in it. But yeah, that first year, I just wanted to get through it, where I did not think I was prepared yet. Like, I did not imagine in my wildest dreams we would be there that quickly, and it really caught me by surprise. And I'm glad it didn't go worse. I feel like there was I think because I did want, a future like the one we got. I was very like, man, if I say the wrong thing right now, I could set us back a decade, and I will always be grateful that did not occur.
I guess, you said that there was that commentary that happened in 2012, and Evan texted you saying, what should we do about that? On some level, were you, you were terrified, but also were you thinking, well, it's amazing that, it has come to pass and we can now set us on the right path.
Yeah, I thought it was super cool when we got the ask. But to me, it was important. Like, well, the goal wasn't to get there. The goal is to fix it, right? And like part of fixing it is performing well. And right. I think for me, like, I was confident Evan was going to be a huge upgrade. I think for me, we're trading camera presence for knowledge. The times like, well, I've never been in this situation before. Like, I don't know how I'm going to react, especially if something genuinely surprises me and throws me off a little bit. And yeah, it was fun to kind of work through that. And public speaking is such an important skill that I definitely have to thank Pokemon a little bit, where I'm sure it helps me in ways I don't even understand. But at the time, I think I was in way over my head, and I'm just glad it worked out.
Sure. Well, thank you for that explanation, and thank you for your question. Next question now from Pika Kapika is how I want to pronounce that. I apologize if I mispronounced it. Which Pokemon has left the biggest impression on you in VGC so far? And if the answer is Pachirisu, what's the next one?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not Pachirisu. I think for me, it's probably... depending on what angle I want to come at this with, it might be Incineroar. I think it's really interesting to me as someone who kind of just enjoys like theory about the game. Both the varying opinions people have about whether Incineroar is balanced well or not, and in my personal opinion that it's overpowered, but almost every format is better if Incineroar is in it. I think it is way too good at its job in the sense that like I've heard some players say the phrase like roll condensation. And I think that might be too far for me to use on stream or in an article or something. But I think it's a really cool concept, right? Where it's like, you want all these attributes on your team. How do you get them to as few spots as possible so you can cover as many bases, or like you have more room for like tech Pokemon or whatever? And I think Incineroar is like the densest Pokemon in the game. I assume it's not Incineroar literally, it's like Cosmoem probably. But like from its attributes, it's the densest, right? Where like it's got Intimidate, it can cycle itself out. It's good defensively. The year before Intimidate was available, I was actually playing it on some teams. I thought it was like shockingly good even without Intimidate, just kind of using its stats and its typing. It's way too much, right? But I think, again, as a old man remembering the good old days. Like, I like when the formats are a little bit slower, but like slow in a way that isn't going to leave us to Stack Attacka fighting Stack Attacka for 7 years. Although every once in a while those games are really fun to cast. And I think Incineroar is perfect, where like it doesn't stall out games infinitely, but it makes them more methodical, right? And definitely centralizing, and I understand why some people think too centralizing in the sense like you always need an answer for it. Like if you don't play well against Incineroar, you just can't participate. But I appreciate Incineroar's service. I think it has done a great job of making our game more tactical. And I think if what I view my job as now is trying to make the players sound smarter and more likable, I think Incineroar is also working toward the same goal by kind of providing the tools to make the battles look more skill-based. So, you know what? It might be a little overtuned, but I think it's the hero of VGC, even though it plays the heel.
Very well summarised, yeah. Incineroar ubiquitous ever since its introduction. Fascinating to get your perspective on that. Thank you for that, Scott. Now, final question here from Corey Yan. And Corey, thank you so much for your support of the show and the channel. Which Worlds Finals has been your favourite to commentate? / what's been your favourite match to commentate in your career thus far?
There's some weird answers this one. I mean, obviously, I think I'm going to throw 15 out, right? Where, like, certainly, it's a special place in Pokemon lore. I do not think I was especially good on that match, so it is probably not my favorite. And also, like, I appreciate its contributions, but I'm a little sick of it, right? It just, it's like Gengar, it's followed me like a shadow. I think my favorite is the Yokohama Finals. I was not expecting to be at Masters Finals that year, but I think for me, it's the only time I've gotten to do a match I felt like was really important while I also had my adult brain. And I guess like kind of what I mean by that is like, I definitely at first I didn't appreciate the situation I was in enough. I think it all happened so quickly. I didn't have a chance to kind of just enjoy it for what it was, right? I think even the Pachirisu game was starting to come around, but I was a late bloomer, right? I think I really grew up a lot during the pandemic. And, when I came back to casting both the first time and the second time, right, I was lower on the depth chart than I was the first time, right? I got to experience the early days kind of being the guy and the analyst. And then, we've done a more than adequate job of replacing what I once was, right? So it was weird and cool to be on Masters Finals for Worlds again, but also, both the location and also who I was doing with were both like really cool parts of the memory for me. Kind of to the thought of, building VGC and imagining what it could someday become. I never imagined I'd ever be casting in Japan, right? I think that was a super cool moment. I understand why my partner Adam stepped away there, right? There's no height quite like that one. But it was cool to be doing that match with him, knowing it was going to be his last match. I think it wasn't public at that time, and I think some of the other talent even didn't know, but we'd talked about it. Like, I understood the situation. I understood that's why I was on the match too, is that we were giving him the send-off that he deserved. He did a ton of great work for the stream for so long, and it was cool to get to be there with him. I think when I wasn't casting, Adam's work did a lot to make me feel better about the stream, where, it was still kind of my baby, right? Where I was there the early years, and even though it wasn't my show, I care a lot about the quality of the stream. And Adam doing such a good job was a great relief to me when all I was off, and I was glad I could get to help give him a good exit. A super cool moment. I think it was a great match. And watching a Japanese player win in Japan, like it's pretty fairy tale, right? It was neat to get to be a part of that whole thing.
Yeah, fantastic answer. And to hear Adam's perspective on that, I have had Adam Doricott on the podcast as well, former caster. So check out that episode. It will be linked below. Well, fascinating. Thank you very much for all of your questions there. If you'd like to submit a question for a future guest on Chazingdra Chats, I am at Chazingdra across all socials. Give me a follow there. That's why I post the call-outs for questions for my guests. I would love to hear what you'd love to hear. All right then, Scott, so we've heard a lot about you up to now, but what's next for you?
Oh gosh, I hope a nap. We'll see, right? I never know how this casting is going to go. I like going to the West Coast regionals, so if you see me, say hello. I can be an intimidating fellow, but I promise it's just being a weird guy. I like it when people say hello.
Absolutely. Can confirm, having spent a significant amount of time with you in person now, I would say a teddy bear. A very small teddy bear. Now, final question for you, Scott. Looking back from now, as someone who has such an incredible pedigree in Pokemon casting, all the way back to the young Scott, who, as soon as Pokemon came out, was enamored with it, beat the Pokedex on Pokemon Blue. What advice would you give to that younger you?
I mean, I think in a cool way, there isn't much need for advice, right? I think if there's anything, maybe, just not to take it so seriously. Where, there's probably at points taking it too seriously help me out. But like, I think if I look at my low points, I think especially taking myself too seriously, right? Where Pokemon's fun, ultimately, in this crazy world we're all living in. It's a great thing to kind of bring more enjoyment to all of our lives. And I think the less seriously you take it to some extent, the better. But yeah, I mean, I think if I went back to that, and I think about this every once in a while when I'm down on myself, like, I would be pretty proud of myself, right? I think I could never imagine things I would get to do. I've got so many friends through Pokemon that, again, at the beginning, as a way of making friends, right? And even adult me, most of my closest friendships in some way revolve around Pokemon, right? I can't imagine the enrichment that it's given me. I've gotten to go so many cool places. I've gone to so many different countries, to so many different cities. I'm a big food traveler. I've gotten to experience so much cuisine that I wouldn't have if I didn't have this. We've gone to places like Japan and Korea, and like local players have shown us around, and it's really opened up the world to me. And maybe stick with it as some of that too, right? Where there's points where it's like I was thinking about getting out of it, or where Pokemon had stopped being such a huge part of my life. But for me, it's all been worth it, right? And I guess it'd be good to go back knowing it was all going to work out, I guess, because sometimes it felt like it didn't. But I think because of Pokemon, I've gotten to live a really cool life.
Wonderful words. Thank you so much for that, Scott. And the chat is not in there because now we're getting into Scott GLAZA's Rapidash round. 15 or so minutes of bonus questions that Scott is not prepared for. And as with all my guests, there's so much more I want to take a deeper dive into. I want to know what Scott's favourite format to play and cast has been. Fondest memories from Scott's casting career, going a little bit deeper into that. Advice to aspiring casters and many more things besides. If you want to hang out with me and Scott for a little bit longer, then you can become a YouTube channel member or find the Rapidash rounds individually on my Patreon. The links will be below. Fundamentally, I really appreciate the fact that you've listened to or watched this episode in its entirety, but if you want to spend a little bit more time with me and Scott, then that option is available to you. Again, links below. But Scott, thanks so much again for joining me on the show. It's been wonderful just to hang out and explain these stories.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here.
It's been wonderful to talk to you.
You're welcome to follow me on social. I would not look forward to too many posts, at Cam Ostrom everywhere.
And everybody, if you've enjoyed this chat once more, please do like and subscribe. It would mean a huge amount and ensures that I can continue to do this. And drop a comment too, because Scott, as with all my guests, has given us so much food for thought. Would love to know what you thought of Scott's 6 Pokemon picks, the tales that he's shared with us, how Scott's picks time with your own Pokemon picks. Can't believe we're approaching episode 100 with a broad range of guests, not just within the competitive Pokemon VGC community, but trading card game Go, Unite, as well as more casual players, shiny hunters, the works. There's bound to be something for everyone. You could use the hashtag 6Pokemon One Life Story, spread the word about the show and also my channel. I stream various challenges within the games. I do silly Pokemon comedy skits and one-liners and all sorts of content planned. And I'm at Chazingdra across all socials, Discord community link below, email link below. Alright then, Scott, so with that being said, it's now time for your Rapidash round. So if you're not joining us as a YouTube channel member or over on Patreon for that, see you next time on Chazingdra Chats, where there'll be another 6 Pokemon One Life Story. Right then, Scott, how are you feeling about these bonus questions?
Oh, I'm just so good off the top of my head, so I can't imagine how long this is going to go.
Wonderful. Well, if that's not an advert to tune in, then I don't know what better one there would be. Let's kick things off here with your favourite format to play and cast.